So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar of 2026, rot remediation, file share cleanup, and how to do it right. If you are new and you have not met us before, my name is Jen Nelson. I'm the VP of Strategic Solutions at Valora Technologies, and joining me is my friend Sandy Serkis, who's co-founder and CEO. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and Happy New Year. Our webinar series for 2026 is an aggressive one. We've got 10 planned for this year. We're going to kick up our feet in July and August, but for every other month this year, we are talking about rot remediation, records retention, how to do it right, structured data, unstructured data, AI, how AutoClassification help with AI, AutoClassification AI trends, and of course, data privacy, and how do you best use AutoClassification for enterprise search. So there's a little bit of everything here this year. So a little bit about Valora. If you are new here, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. But a little bit about us. So this will be our 26th year in business, founded in 2000. So we're very excited about that. We offer an auto-classification platform for information governance. So it leverages auto-classification technology and machine learning algorithms to help automate discovery, identification, classification, and the defensible disposition of data, regardless of where it lives across the enterprise. And it's mainly used by information governance teams, records teams, legal, compliance, IT, because the beauty of it is that it brings multiple enterprise systems into a single pane of glass view. And not only does it help bring those different systems into a view, but it also helps bring multiple use cases. Because it used to be that records management and information governance were kind of like this. People thought it was the same thing, like find the record, keep the record, get rid of the record at the appropriate time. But we know now in enterprise-wide data governance that everything that we create and touch and manage has a life cycle and should be managed appropriately to account for things like legal holds and data privacy requests and e-discovery processes and things like that. So ultimately, is this what Valora brings to the table, is the ability not only to view and manage content in that single pane of glass, but the ability to defensively manage across these different use cases. So that is a little bit about us. A little bit about you. We always ask you when you register kind of where you're coming from and what your challenges are. So we've got lots of records and information management folks around the table today. So welcome. No IT folks, but that's okay. We pick on IT a little bit here. So that's all right that we don't have a lot of IT people here. And your main challenges kind of going into this month and this year, certainly looking for challenges at file cleanup and rot reduction was exactly what we're going to talk about today. A lot of folks looking for help to manage retention policies and automate some workflows. And then, of course, oh my gee, everything. So you're in the Jurgen company today with the folks around you and what we'll be talking about. So some housekeeping before we actually get into the meat of it. We have a Q&A set up. There's a chat and there's Q&A. So please feel free to use either of those to communicate. I don't know if we've started something. It's over here on my screen, so can I see it?
Got it, Jen.
Okay, Sandy's all over it. This is being recorded, so we will send you a link to the recording after the fact. We'll send you some slides, and of course, we would welcome your feedback about content or anything else you'd like to see. All right, that's enough intro. Let's get into it. So we do have a bit of an agenda today. We usually try to keep it in within 55 minutes, which I think we can. But today we're going to be talking about file shares. What the heck? And why are we still talking about file shares in the year of our Lord 2026? What is rot and how did it get there? The impact of rot across our organizations, which of course includes risk and compliance and effort. Why is deleting content so very hard for us to do as IG folks and humans in general? And then identifying and remediating rot the right way. And we've also got some gotchas and tips at the end to kind of things to watch for. Again, been around for a little bit and have seen lots of things. And you look for our little ghosts too, because we've got some scary stories or real world examples of rot. And before we dive in and I hand it over to Sandy, I will say Sandy and I sit in a very unique position of being able to talk to so many businesses about their data challenges, about their goals, about their objectives in the business. And it really is when we talk with people are kind of sometimes sound very embarrassed. They're like, we actually don't know where everything is. We've got these unstructured file shares we've had since the dawn of time, and we just don't know. So if you are in that boat, you are not alone. And I would hazard a guess that most people on the call today are in that boat. And yes, it's great that your organizations are looking to remedy that, but it is a very, very common problem. So, and something that we see like literally daily. So no shame here. But that's what we're going to talk about today. Again, questions in the chat, and we'll answer them as we go. If not, we'll save them for the end. And Sandy, I'll hand it over to you to start the conversation about what actually is rot.
So I'm guessing that most people on this call already know what rot is, but in the event that you don't feel bad. We start at the beginning. So rot stands for redundant, obsolete, and trivial. Redundant simply means maybe extra copies, maybe duplicates, stuff that was accidentally, copied over here but never deleted from over here. So believe it or not, there's tons and tons of redundant content out there. Sometimes it can be hard to tell, and we're going to get into detecting duplicates and near duplicates, so I won't steal that thunder right now. Obsolete data is data that generally, when in kind of records and information governance, when we're talking about obsolete data, we mean data that's past retention. But it can also mean data that is no longer applicable, no longer valid, no longer correct. It's basically data that you have that causes more trouble than its value. That's the best way I can define obsolete. And then we have trivial, which by definition has low business value. So things like an email auto reply or sort of remnant documents from things that are no longer even in play anymore, system generated announcements and stuff like that. So trivial content, while individually not problematic, it can clutter things up. It makes it hard to search. You're paying for storage that you don't need. It's just extra crud. And then there's another category that I keep lobbying to try and add to the definition of rot, whether you call it ROIT, R-O-I-T, or ROTI, R-O-T-I. And that fourth category is inappropriate. So what do we mean by inappropriate? It's basically content you shouldn't have, and yet you do. So examples of that might be content that was gotten under circumstances that maybe weren't as kosher or as clean as they would be today. So for example, content you got without maybe the proper basis at the time, or content that you inherited in an acquisition or some other way you might inherit content, or content that you shouldn't have any longer because you said you would dismiss it at the end of XYZ transaction, and yet it's still lingering around. So that's what I mean by inappropriate. It's content, let alone the other kind of inappropriate content that piles up in organizations. Looking at you, pornography. So lots of different types of inappropriate. So that's Sandy's unofficial fourth category. Okay, we said duplicates. Is this me?
This is you.
All right. So there's different types of duplicates out there. Duplicates are the general understanding of what redundant content is, and it's important to understand this distinction. So most people, when they're talking about duplicates, they are talking about identical duplicates. That's this left column here. Exact duplicates, they are 100% forensically identical. They share what is called a hash code, a match. It's like a digital fingerprint. They are literally clones. And those are the ones that are, if you have one, maybe you don't need the other 40,000 versions of the thing. They are identical copies. How does that happen? When we send out the slide deck from this presentation to all of you, you will all have an identical copy of that slide deck. That's exact dupes. Then we have this notion of what we call functional duplicates. So functional duplicates are files that look and feel and kind of act the same, but are not technically identical dupes. They are not clones. They are not hash matches. The canonical example of this is, say, a Word file that gets saved as a PDF. The Word and the PDF will not have a hash match, even though they look the same, the content is the same, the metadata will be the same, except for file extension, possibly source, certainly time generated. Okay, not all metadata going to match, but you get the point. They probably want to be treated the same based on the nature of what they are, even though they don't hash match. And this is why, Valora makes good use of this concept of functional duplicates. We call them sometimes 99% similar. It's really probably more like 99.999. It's just short of the hash match. And then we get into the similar territory. That's near dupes. So near dupes are similar, but definitely not fully identical. They're not functional dupes at all. They are simply based on a content match and sometimes a metadata match to say, really, how similar are these? You've seen various programs that will compare text. This is different, redlining, that kind of thing. That's where near duplicates play. And the challenge for us in information governance is a near duplicate close enough that you would do something as a category of these documents, or are they far enough apart that you want to treat them separately? And that's always a nuanced question, which is why near duplicates is both valuable and problematic at the same time. But we wanted to make you aware of them because at least the technology to detect them is available. What you do with that information is where the nuance is. You want to take this one, or is this me?
This is you, but I don't mind taking it. Why the heck are we still talking about Windows file shares? Why the heck? Because literally everyone has them, and unstructured data is hard. We have, again, where I was talking about the advantage of being able to talk to a lot of different businesses. Everyone's still using file shares, even when they say they're not, or their actual ECMs are, SharePoint or OneDrive or other kind of heavy iron ECMs. But the thing is, we've had them forever. They have been around since 1996, and so have many businesses, obviously, that we work in every day, and they have been a catch-all for everything. What started as probably a very nice kind of structured file folder structure environment where we knew where things were and what they were, and there was like 30 people and maybe 3 terabytes of data. It was manageable, but now there are thousands of abandoned file shares sitting on multiple servers. Employees who knew the system or knew how it was organized or knew what was in there are long gone. And so there really is no way of really understanding or knowing what's in there, because it just Windows file shares as its nature doesn't give us that kind of window into kind of what's in there. And we were chatting with a client who has 250 petabytes in file shares, if you can even believe it. I was going to do math on that, but it's just ginormous. So they're still in use. They are alive and well. Sandy, how much ROD we got? And what is the big deal? Depending on what system or what studies you read from ARMA and AIM, usually folks say between 40 and 70% of enterprise data is rot. We usually find with clients that it's around the 50% mark, just from what we've experienced. And it does impact so many other things in the business. Certainly data storage costs, if we're looking at it from a financial perspective, absolutely data storage costs. But it also opens us up to breach exposure. When there's a data breach and you don't know what is in your file shares and you have no idea what's been compromised, that is a risk. It impacts litigation and e-discovery fees because you've got to sift through all this garbage to try to find those needles in the haystack. Certainly from a privacy and privacy and compliance perspective, where you know there's personal data in there, but you don't really know where or what or who has access. And of course, I would say the biggest one that we're seeing mostly in the last 24 months certainly is the impact that rot has on AI. Because if you are feeding an AI and training an LLM on outdated information, obsolete information, trivial emails back and forth about lunch dates, that's not helpful for large language models to learn on. So clearing that out enables those LLMs and enables your business to be ready for AI, so that you are confident that you are sending and asking the LLMs to learn on appropriate data. Sandy, do you want to take this?
Yes, so I'm just keeping up with you in the background here as well.
Okay.
So, oh, whoops, wait, I'm on a different slide than you are. There we go. Okay. So basically, as Jen said, our experience shows about 50% of your data estate is rot. And so in addition to all the problems that causes, the opportunity is the natural ROI that suggests. So you can start to think about, what is the cost of storing all of that extra rot, let alone, that's the hard cost. The soft cost would be the pain in the butt factor in having to sift through it or search it or discount it or whatever when you're trying to do your work. But the hard cost, just the storage cost of rot, makes it very clear what the kind of the financial impact, what the pain of having all of that extra data is. And that is what sets you guys up. We now can build an ROI. In other words, a return on investment for cleaning up the data. So if you are looking for ways to promote your program, get budget for your program, justify your program, this is probably the single best way and the easiest ROI to show. So for example, if your organization is spending $2 or $3 million or more on data storage costs, and by the way, we can help you assess what that is. You can go out and look on Azure, what does it cost to store data, and multiply that by the amount of data that you think you have, or we've done some of this ROI, just let us know. But basically, if you're spending 2 or 3 million or more on that, you should see an ROI of over 90% and cover the cost of an auto-classification effort more than 10 times. So again, we can show you that math, but that's all prior to even the benefits you're going to get for cleaning up your data for AI usage. That's on top of what I just said. So we find that it's a relatively easy calculation to make. It's very easy to explain this to senior executives about the benefit and why you want to get your data under control. So that's the kind of cost side of it. I mentioned the productivity. This is more anecdotal. What you'll hear is people are struggling to find the information they need. They either have to recreate it, reinvent the wheel, or things take so much longer. What we often hear, take something like a DSAR. You have to fulfill a DSAR or litigation request or whatever, something where you're being asked to produce all the documentation related to X or employee Y or customer Z. That is taking people about 3 weeks to get to all their systems and make sure they have literally covered all the ground. When you do an auto-classification effort and you pull everything into that single pane of glass, that effort should take you about 2 seconds to determine. And that is the differential between, let's say, 3-4 weeks of manual effort versus 2 seconds of a data query. So that's a huge kind of soft cost ROI. And then the last one is literally the risk and exposure. So when you're storing all of this extra content, yes, it makes it harder to know what you have, where it is. Much, much harder to answer the question of, did you get everything? Are you sure this is everything? Are we missing anything? Are there whole SharePoint sites or whatever that we forgot about? This kind of covers off that case, and you can answer with confidence, yes, everything is accounted for. It also covers off, are we properly storing information about patients, about customers, about employees? Because of the sensitive data that information contains, we know where that information is, we know that it is being managed properly, and we know that it's being managed according to retention policy. Those are huge statements to be able to make with confidence that reduce the risk and the exposure of the organization. And we don't even have on here, we really should have another bullet here, Jen, which is I'll call it the attack vector exposure. The more data you keep, the bigger your attack vector, point blank, full stop. So if you are keeping, at 50%, you are keeping twice as much information as you should be, then your attack vector is literally twice as big. You might as well just make the bullseye on your back twice as large. So why not reduce your attack vector wherever, whenever you can? And I'm using those words on purpose because that's kind of information security speak. That's where you're going to find an alliance from your CISO, from your security department. They are the ones with the big budgets. When you talk in those terms, they are going to pay attention. And then the last one, of course, the ever-present compliance risk. Do you have data you're not supposed to have, either because you got it without basis, because you're keeping it without basis, because you're using it without basis, or because you just didn't even know? Okay, you want to get out of this. I don't know what I have. I don't know why I have it. I don't know where it came from. You want to get out of that I don't know what's happening kind of stance.
Yeah, absolutely. So we get it. We're people too, and deleting content is hard. So if this is you hanging on to your old data, or someone more likely than not in your organization, these are ways that we can help. But why are people so resistant to deleting their data? Some people have this perception of value where I might need it one day because it may be some importance in the future. Some abandoned file shares maybe our lack of ownership. We don't really know who owns this content, so we don't want to delete it just in case we might need it. There's the save everything mindset, and some people have some on the organization level have just kept everything that they have ever created, not a word of a lie, and they're keeping it just in case. Which is obviously a nightmare / headache. And then there's regulatory concerns where we've talked to some organizations that have had misunderstandings about what their legal and compliance obligations are. So they're holding on to everything just in case so that they have it, which is not on side. And then fear of change. Nobody likes to change the way they do things or wants to get rid of their stuff. And also new workflows, or, this might disrupt my schedule, or might disrupt the way that I do things or where I save things from. So there's a lot of reasons why deleting content is so hard. One IG professional that I was chatting with, she's obviously IG manager tasked with this exact challenge in her organization. And she approached it from this learning to let it go shift is really more a shift in thinking and behavior. Why are we saving things we don't need to? And so she had said she started less with we're going to get in there, we're going to delete it. And she started with more of an educational cultural shift to try to get people understand the importance of reducing duplicates and reducing rot. And she likened it to 15 to 20 years ago to try to get people to stop printing stuff. So imagine yourself Can you even believe 20 years ago is 2006 though? That's a lie. But think about that back then. When you were going to read an email, you'd print it. If you want to come back to it later, you'd print it. You had a document you wanted to read, you would print it. Like that's what we did. And so during that time, she was trying to make that cultural shift from stop printing everything because A, you've now created a duplicate of that information, and B, now it exists in another format. And I now, as the records manager, need to be able to account for it and manage it through its now paper life cycle. So her message then was stop printing. And so when you think about it, like when is the last time you printed an email so you could read it later? Like it is funny to think about now, but her challenge was, and her approach was to kind of come at it like that. Like we're eventually going to live in a world where if you don't need it, you get rid of it and you don't need to hang on to it. But the other side of that coin is sometimes, well, storage is cheap, right? Like, why not save it? And need more storage? No problem. Just dial up IT, and IT will be happy to spark up another file share SharePoint site to manage that kind of that storage capacity. And another IG professional I was chatting with, I don't think she's on the call today, but I hope she is. I was chatting with her and she likened it to cleaning your fridge at home. So IG looks at this and says, there is so much stuff in here. Half of it's probably rotten. I can't find anything. I don't know what's in here and I've run out of room. And if IT were to come into your kitchen, they'd say, no problem. We got more storage for you. Here's another fridge to keep all your stuff. And IG, we don't need more storage. We just need to manage what we have so that when we open it, we can see what's there. Everything's organized. I know where my oranges are. So it was an interesting analogy to where IT is just going to throw you another fridge in your kitchen to store your stuff. But we know that that's not the right thing to do. Clean up what you've got. So it makes everyone's life a little easier. But in also chatting with other organizations, some are relying on their RMIG teams to do it, to figure it out. And the reality is that humans cannot keep up. Everyone, including the IG teams, are, legal, compliance, privacy. What do we have? Where is it? What is it? Who owns it? Where are the dupes? What's the risk of stuff being out there? And we have far past that point where we can rely on humans to do that. So the manual categorization of all this stuff is so prone to risks when we're relying on humans. There's the inconsistency. I say tomato. Sandy says tomato. A lot of people say, she doesn't really say tomato. A lot of people saying, that's not my job. I'm in accounting. I don't care what the file share looks like. That's your job. And also scalability issues. When we're sitting on 20 years of old data, and creating new stuff every day, how is anyone possibly keep up with that? And of course, there's a compliance risk by allowing humans to do that, and then the limited auditability and the lack of transparency. Why did I call it this? I don't know. I can't remember. So there's that. And of course, time consuming and costly. And someone asked me, but like, how costly? Well, if you wanted the math, we'll do the math quickly, that if it takes 30 seconds to manually classify one document, and for 1 million documents, it would take, one employee to manually classify 260,000 documents in a year. And an average employee in a business resends and receives about 100 emails or works on 100 different docs a day or 10 different docs a day. So you can imagine that in a 1,000-person organization, we are creating 1.32 million documents a year. Now, that is absolutely conservative, I realize, but we're talking about 1,000 people. So for a business that's got 1,000 people that have been in business for 20 years, that's a backlog of up until today of over 4 million documents that we would need to go through and say, what's wrong? What's this? Can I get rid of it? And when we do the math, it would take over 1,600 employee years to get through the backlog from the last 20 years. Well, we can say, that's no problem. We're just going to hire a team of humans to do it. So if we hired them in the US, we would need about 330 humans, knowing that how many you can classify in a day, which over 5 years would be over $100 million in dollars for that. We're not going to do it in the US. We'll do it overseas, where it's $5,000 a year to pay somebody an average salary to do that. even in that case, for hiring 330 people to go through your backlog, it's still going to cost over $8 million over 5 years. And again, the inconsistencies and the risk of having humans do it. And that's just the stuff that we've created before. That's not accounting for the stuff today going forward. So there is an actual cost to asking humans to do this task. So really, the reality is technology is the only way to do this at scale. It reduces human error. You can scale up as big as you need. It reduces risks. You've got that auditability. You can see how the decisions were made, and it audits and tracks that. And of course, that reduction of time, cost, risk, backup cost, storage cost, and then the time it takes to do things. As Sandy was mentioning, a DSAR request or e-discovery request, any kind of knowledge management request, or looking and searching for stuff, very easy to do.
So we have also assembled a list of what not to do. Some of this is common sense, I hope, and some of it comes from, let's just say, battle scars, from having worked with folks like yourselves over the years and seeing maybe not the best approaches. So we wanted to share these. These are the do nots on this page. So one of the things that we see, and this is really common, is an organization says, okay, we're ready. We're going to clean up our file shares. We've got 300 file shares. We're going to start on file share A. Everybody keep using file shares B through Z, or worse, keep using A while we are trying to assess what's in there. That is a mistake. You will always be chasing your tail in that situation. And what we would recommend instead is lock down the file share, certainly the ones that are actively being assessed. Lock them down as read-only. Do not let people make changes to the content in the file share while it's being analyzed. Do not let them add further content. Presumably you have another location where content is going to live in the future. Maybe it's SharePoint, maybe it's something else. So get people's head around this concept of we're going to kind of lock down the change agent of the file share. We're going to lock it down and make a kind of point in time at which this is where the file share kind of ended its ability to change. So that's our recommendation to you. Can you keep working with the file share and classify and catch your tail? Yes, you can. You will eventually catch up to yourself, but it is not our recommended approach. Another big thing that we see is organizations like, yes, let's go. We're going to classify everything. We're going to get everything under control. Yay, go. And that is the extent of their plan. That is a recipe for failure. It is important that you have priorities. What are the most egregious areas, or what are the areas that you want to tackle first? So you should have kind of a processing priority. What are the ones, again, if you have any instinct at all, what are the areas that you think are the most problematic? Maybe you want to do those first, maybe you want to save them for last, but have a plan. The other thing is what happens while things are in play. What's accessible, what's not, what are you going to allow people to do, not do? Think about those things before you start classifying and removing your data. We're going to get into in a minute what some of those options are to kind of make it easier for people to accept the notion that data is going to be departing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Another big mistake is Jen really very well, pointed out with her spectacular math skills there.
And math is the math.
The math is the math. Math is truth. Is do not rely on manual efforts, whether it's the efforts of the IG or the RIM team, or, everyone has these kind of deputies out in these other business units. The math does not work on all of them in the same way. It's just a losing battle to rely on manual efforts. And then this one's a big one. Mostly what we see is under deleting, which is people either saving everything or the classic example of putting something under legal hold and then never removing the hold ever, even though the matter settled 15 years ago. That is a big mistake and really kind of unacceptable. So those are in the under deleting category. And then there's the over deleting category, Over deleting happens when basically we just kind of use the wrong determinants for deletion. And the number one wrong determinant, I'm going to get on my soapbox here, so fair warning, is using simple time as the determinant of worth of a document. Well, this email's older than 90 days, it must be garbage. That's a terrible way to determine whether something is rot. Far better to know what it actually is and whether it has any value. If it's a spam coupon from a place you don't even frequent, then you shouldn't save it for 90 seconds. There's no need to save it for 90 days. And if it happens to be the signed contract that DocuSign wasn't working that day and it came through email instead, we better not delete that one in 90 days unless it's been accounted for. So the value of content matters far more than a time window matters, which is why, by the way, we always hear these organizations of, well, we tried to institute a 90-day rule and everybody went berserk. So now it's 120 days. Now it's a year rule. Now it's a 3-year rule. Why do you think that's happening? It's not happening just because people, time. It's because they can't make that assessment of value in the time window allotted. The problem is the time window and the inability to assess value. Okay, off soapbox. Another big problem that we see is that organizations kind of have a project-based mentality. And I know where this comes from. It comes from saying, here's your money, give me that ROI that you just talked about, Sandy, and then get away. And that is really not what information governance is. It is a lifetime commitment. It's like good, healthy, clean living. It has to be a long-term, sustainable, perpetuating process. And to go into it with a project-based notion is really a disservice to yourself, to the organization. All you're doing is setting up another project down the road to clean up, next time. So far better to put in place perpetual programs. Well, I kind of covered this one, didn't I, with the with the over deletion. This is the clear cutting files based on time. And then this is another big mistake. We see this all the time. There's often a push from IT groups, and apparently we don't have any on this call, so I can put this out there, which is, well, let's migrate everything over to M365 and we'll sort it out later. That is a mistake because A, it's never going to get sorted if you do that. And B, now you're paying for data that you shouldn't have. It's past retention you shouldn't have had in the first place, or you shouldn't still have it. Clean up first, and that makes your migration effort fast, efficient, and clean.
Right. Oh, and there's our scary story, Sandy, that you had mentioned. Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay, so is this one me too? Yes. Okay. So we gave you the do nots. These are the do's. Basically, always consider what is the file, like what does the file say? What are its contents? It is no longer the case that we just simply cannot know. AutoClassification brings the ability to the table to know what you have. So anyone that tells you, well, I'll never know, there's 30,000 files, there's 30 million files. How will I ever know what's in there? Run some quick classification and then you'll know. This one I can't stress enough. Involve other stakeholders. One, because they are going to see eye to eye with you more than you think, particularly legal, IT, and compliance, the ones Jen's listed here. Not only that, they tend to have the budget, I'm looking at you, IT, and they tend to have the clout, looking at you, legal, to be able to push these kind of programs through. I would strongly recommend you benchmark your current processes. We mentioned a couple. How long does it take you to fulfill a litigation pull? How long does it take you to fulfill a subject access request? How long does it take you to respond to an inquiry? Is it more than a couple of seconds? Because if it is, then your processes need kind of an overhaul. And they are, again, the easiest way to show this was money well spent. We took the effort down from 3 months to 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Very important that you respect other data requirements. Legal hold is the obvious one, but there are others. There are reasons. The whole notion of retention is kind of changing. It used to be retention was really only about what is the last possible date in which I can still hold something. In other words, this expires on January 1st and then it is past retention. We also now have today the other thing, which is when does the retention window begin? In other words, what are the obligations around the holding of this data while it is active? Do I have to hold it a certain way? Do I have to protect it in a certain way? What kind of jurisdictions is it, responsive to? There are all kinds of requirements around information governance that begin when the content is born and end or may not end when the content is deleted. We're going to get into tombstoning, so I'm going to skip over that for now. I will say these last two work together. One of the things that we sometimes have to remind information governance folks, you guys are a modest bunch. You tend not to toot your own horn, and sometimes that works against you because people don't know who you are, they don't know what you do, and they're certainly not looking at you as the heroes that saved the day. But that is precisely what you are. You are reducing risk left, right, and center for your organization. You guys should wear like big S's for super people on your shirts because you are kind of single-handedly saving the organization from potential risk. You're like the vaccinations. And accordingly, that's, we recommend that you think long-term. When you're in there, you're analyzing data, you're going to be doing rot cleanup. Don't just think rot. Think what else can we solve for as long as we're looking at data. Yes, we're going to look for dupes. Yes, we're going to look for junk. Yes, we're going to look for stuff past retention. But while we're at it, if we're going to be classifying, could you also tell me what all the stuff is? Could you tell me who's the custodian or whether it contains patient data or employee information? That is a relatively easy lift when you're doing all of this other stuff. You might as well do it all together and get a complete picture, not just a rot picture. Think of rot as kind of the tipping point to get these kind of data discovery processes rolling, and then use that to get all the kind of discovery that would be valuable to you and to plenty of others in your organization.
So how do you even do it? It's the how. How do you possibly do it when you can pick up like that rot content from the content that has actual business value? So when we establish that no human can do it, then we need to rely on technology to do it. And this is, spoiler alert, this is how Valora does it. We do a data discovery to locate and inventory all of the data. And do we do an intelligent analysis? So that's that full text content analysis that we often talk about to auto-classify. We're going to rely on the system telling us what that data is based on the content that is present in each document. And then we apply defensible disposition rules and workflows. If it's this, do this. And then we go back around. Every day we're creating new data, we're moving stuff, we're emailing things. So ongoing scans of those different environments will ensure that we are up to date in the management and understanding what's in there, be it rot or be it content of value. So auto-classification, the technology itself is just that. It is technology, and it is the software that's performing that automated analysis for us. So we're not relying on humans or sending it to Linda in accounting saying, just tell me what all this stuff is. It's the software doing it. And it's going to answer that question for us. What is this thing and what do I do with it? How do I treat it? Who should have access? How is it handled? And then does it for us. So first, it's going to look for that rich metadata. It's going to take, sure, we'll take the file metadata, but it doesn't really tell us much about what's going on in that document. So we're going to read that document and start pulling out that rich metadata. We don't care. We talked about, creation date or, it was created 90 days ago, get rid of it. We don't care about the creation date. We don't care about the last modified date. We care if it's a document like a contract, we care about the creation date or the signature date or the effective date or the renewal date. That's what we care about. So it's going to read the document. It's going to start pulling out that rich metadata. And then we'll apply those recognition algorithms to say, oh, this is a contract or this is a balance sheet. And then it will apply the disposition algorithms to say, okay, if it's this, then do this with it. So if it's an employment contract, mark it as confidential, move it to HR's SharePoint, retain this for 8 years after the employee is terminated. Now, this is an employment contract, so that date hasn't even contemplated yet. So it's going to look for that though. And then when it's up for deletion, don't delete it right away. Get HR's approval before you delete it. So it's all those kinds of workflows and that automation that can be built in. And when we talk about disposition, it could be anything. It could be tagging, deleting, migrating, holding, anonymizing, whatever we need to do with that data, we can help to automate those workflows as well. So when we're auto-classifying documents, the kind of the visual of that, it's not going to tell us anything about what this is, right? We look at this as what we see in our file shares, and there's no way to determine what that is. But when we're looking at ROT, and when the system is looking at ROT, it's doing a few things. So when it's looking for trivial information, it's going to have that watch list terms. Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday, Happy New Year. It's obviously the date is quite old. There's no content. There's heavy graphics. There's 4,000 copies because I thought it would be a great idea to say Merry Christmas to everybody in the company. So it's going to look at that and it's going to say, yeah, so this is ROT. There's no record class. We don't need to hold it. There's no risk in deleting this. Get rid of it. When we're looking at obsolete content, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to start reading this, pulling out that metadata. What is this about? Where do we keep it? Whatever. If it's past retention, it's going to say this is past retention. When we delete it, what happens? How do we do it? What kind of approvals do we need? So it's going to tell us that. And then when looking for redundant information, then those are the duplicates or the near duplicates. We're going to be able to see very easily with all the duplicates that we have, whether they be identical duplicates or functional duplicates, is to say, what's the team captain? Which of all of these 4,000 copies should I keep? Who's the master? And it really depends. It can be flexible on it. Maybe the legal's version is the master if it's this, or maybe it's contracts who is the master version if it's this kind of document. So it's very flexible in the way that you can determine who should be the team captain, which copy should we keep. And again, very easy to see. And when speaking about Valora's platform, this is what it looks like. So when you've got all of your data set analyzed, you can say, is this file ROT? Yes or no? If it is, what type of ROT is it? So I can visually see it. And then what's the basis for that decision? Why does it think that this is obsolete? Well, because it's past retention and this retention date is X. Or it's redundant because this is an identical duplicate and here are the other duplicates. So it's very, very descriptive onto why, when it pulls back those findings, what this thing is and why it determined it is what it is. Sandy, I'll pass this back to you if you want it.
Yeah, I will take that. So basically, there are a number of different gotchas that we'll try and alert you to so that you can kind of head them off before they even happen. So we used to hear this more. I think as we move to a more kind of cloud-based world, people are realizing storage is not so cheap. So, so that's working in our collective favor here. Again, this is a pretty easy one to quantify and then just make whatever assumptions you want about the amount of ROT you have. One thing that we would recommend you do, typically when we get started with a client, we start on a pilot, which means a small data set. So what we do is kind of do what we kind of call core sampling. We take, let's take a sample from this file share and a sample from that file share so that we get kind of a sense of the ROT kind of percentage rate and say, well, gee, this file share was 80% ROT and that file share was 45% ROT. We can kind of average that. And then you can build that ROI again. So this is not really a gotcha, and the winds are blowing in our favor because storage is getting more and more expensive. We did talk, obviously, about people resisting the cleanup of their data. The number one way we have found to help people through that is to get them involved. And we're going to talk about that on the next slide, actually, different ways to get people involved. What we're actually showing on this picture is a report that our system, Black Hat, generates. So before we just go and delete stuff that's past retention from somewhere, it's very easy, one click, provide a button that says, by the way, marketing departments, here is the list of everything that's past retention that we're looking to delete on, November 30th. You good with this? And it just makes it more palatable. It gives them that opportunity to engage and go, well, I'm good with that, except for this one, and this one. Okay, we'll exclude those. Can we get rid of the rest? It opens up that dialogue instead of being this scary thing. And then this one we hear a lot, which is who kind of owns Raw? Whose fault is this, or who owns this? And we've heard every, all the organizations that we talked to, we've heard every variation out there. And the real answer is one way or another, you're all sharing it. And so what we would recommend is have a shared budget. And it works really well because these type of initiatives solve problems for so many groups. We have a client we're working with now, technically working with their IT group. And out of nowhere came their marketing department going, oh my God, I've been looking for a way to clean this all up. Thank you so much. Well, guess who had some budget? Marketing. And so that kind of changed, and you wouldn't normally think that marketing would be a friend or an ally of information governance. It just so happened in this organization. And if you're not sure, you guys out there, who are your buddies, I recommend you start with legal. Legal's job is to reduce risk for the organization. They are going to understand the concept that removing junk content reduces risk. Your finance department is going to understand reducing content means reducing cost. Start with those.
Absolutely. And these are some examples of the responses to the hell no, you're not deleting my stuff, which we hear a lot. And there are some strategies as to handle that, Sandy.
Yeah. So, this first one, we don't advocate for this, but we know that it goes on. So we are going to acknowledge it outright, which is some organizations kind of have it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's broke, all right. But, okay. Some organizations leave the dupes, leave the junk. If it's relatively low business risk and there are way more, pending problems or pending areas, all right, fine. Leave it alone or leave it for now. The too bad, so sad is the more heavy-handed, which is this is the tough noogies approach, which is, right. This is a risk, and we have been chartered to clean up the risk. So that's where we're going. This is where we would use tombstones. If you're not familiar with tombstones, it's kind of a creepy word, but it's sort of the same idea, which is it's a literal monument to where the content used to live. It's kind of like a shortcut. And it lives where the file used to live because we're so late as a society to get to doing queries and to getting information by the nature of the information that we have become masters at finding them through archaeology, basically, or through mapping and going, well, I know where they are. I follow this folder tree. That's how I get to my content. And because of that people are loath to give that up. So leave the tombstone where they used to go, in the location where they used to go, and go, your data is now here. Here's a link. Goodbye. All right. That is the kind of easy button to get people to go to the right place. This is the gradual goodbye. It sets up the gradual goodbye, what I call the binky response. A binky meaning that like a pacifier that you give to children. And the way we broke my two kids of their binky use was to kind of hide it. I had it, but it was out of sight, out of mind. And I only brought it forward when they asked for it. And eventually they just stopped asking for it. Years later, I found a binky in my underwear drawer because that's where I used to hide them. And so, that this is the binky technique, which is move stuff away, out of sight, out of mind, and see if anybody notices or asks. If they ask, oh, sure, here you go, here it is. Have some sort of time window, 6 months, 12 months, a year, whatever. And then if they haven't asked for it, then chop it. We do want to talk about this sort of obsolescence risk, which is when content persists. Remember that there are 3 big problems of beyond just the pain in the butt factor. That if it persists, it's discoverable, period. Whether you violated your own, retention policies does not matter in the litigation. You have it, it's discoverable. Secondly, if it exists, that AI is going to find it and train on it. And we've talked many times in this forum, on the webinar, elsewhere, about it's pretty well impossible to unbake the AI cake. If you bake a cake with, sour milk, your cake's going to be sour. There's nothing you can do after the cake is baked to unsour it. You put all the sweet frosting on you want, it will not be good. Same thing with AI. Once you incorrectly train it, your only option is to basically clean up and then start over with your training. And then I mentioned this earlier, you're a larger than it should be attack vector. So keeping content when you shouldn't has real measurable risk. Let us know, by the way, if you would like some assistance in measuring that. We have a very nifty ROI calculator. We'd be happy to send you all. If you want that right away, put your name, into the chat. Yes, please send me. And of course, we'll send that out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we've only got a few minutes left, so we'll kind of take these slides. There's just 2 more left. Quite often a question is, how long is this going to something like this take? And the answer is usually it entirely depends. It entirely depends on how complex your environment is, what your goals are, and kind of the amount and type of data. But usually you're up and running within 12 weeks. So we often approach it with a phased implementation to figure out what those priorities are, to set up everything for scanning and for analysis. The first data sets, we're looking at it about 6 weeks, and then by 12 weeks, we're ready to kind of hilt into full processing. And then it kind of just goes from there, and we look at all those different systems to analyze and look at those repositories on an ongoing basis. So that's kind of the not only the timeline, but then the phased implementation that we also use as well. So at 1:59, thank you very much. These would be our final thoughts we'll leave you with these final thoughts to get rid of your rot. The first certainly being enhanced data quality and relevance. You've got what you need and it's correct. We already talked about the cost savings, certainly. The improved compliance and risk management, the efficient information governance and lifecycle management, and the productivity and efficiency, and of course the scalability and adaptability, the ability to just tear through terabytes of data and understand what it is, where it is, and what your risk is. So we will leave you with this. I will send out to everybody a recording of this and the slides as well, so you have them. And we'd like to thank everybody for attending today. We really appreciate your attendance and your participation and again, thank you very much. And we will see you next webinar.